All right, hi everyone. This is Carrie Pike with the Forest Service, and I'm here to just give a brief background presentation for the Eastern Seed Zone Forum. And so I'm just going to show you a brief PowerPoint to describe better what this project is about. And so we're calling it the Eastern Seed Zone Forum. I put the website there. If you've been listening to the webinars, you've heard this is being led by the U.S. Forest Service, state and private, myself in the northeastern area, my colleagues in the southern region, as well as the National Forest System Research and Development and the Washington office. And Southern Regional Extension Forestry has provided us the website and the portal for doing the webinars. And so this has been a collaborative effort so far. So I'm just going to flip through a few slides. So first, I just want to define what is a seed zone to us. Here, a seed zone for us, for our base definition, is a contiguous area that represents the origin of seed. Could be plants or trees. Another way to think about it, it's the smallest unit of area for defining locality, that question, what is local? So the bottom left picture is in a seed cooler. A lot of forestry folks and plant restoration folks, they collect seed, they keep it separate, not just by species, which are the little jars on the right side, but on the left side, they keep it separate by seed source as well. And that seed source is often defined by the seed zone where it came from. Historically, though, a seed zone is also functions as a geographic area in which seed transfer, the movement of seed, is accepted to be done with little or no risk for maladaptation. So it served not just to identify locality, but it was used as a guideline for where to move seed. So if you could move seed safely within your seed zone, but often you didn't move it outside your seed zone. The difference between this movement and other efforts is that we're trying to separate the idea of seed origin, where it came from, which is what we're trying to use seed zones for, from seed transfer, or where it should actually be planted. I'll get into that in a minute. So our goal is simply to develop seed zones that we can use to define localities. They're not perfect surrogates for seed transfer guidelines. It may not always be. They could be used for that, but that's not necessarily our goal. What I'd like to see is use them to define the locality and have consumers determine the sources that they want to plant. So they might say, I would like a bunch of seed sources together in a seed lot, and then the growers ideally would respond to that demand. We're trying to avoid a regulatory route, but instead make this driven by consumer demand. And there are a couple of reasons that we're trying to decouple these concepts. One is for assisted migration, because as the climate warms, land managers are looking for seed outside their seed zone for sources that are adapted to future condition. They're looking south, they're looking west or east, they're looking for other places. And the science of seed transfer is evolving. Different agencies and companies might institute different policies on what seed sources to use. And we don't want this to be a regulatory thing where, well, here's the seed zone, so you have to use that. We wanted to define origin, but then have folks say, well, I'm going to use this seed zone and move it to this specific area. I'm going to use Minnesota as an example. This is a seed zone map that's posted on their website. And I'll give you an example of how they use it. This is the central seed zone in green. So all the seed that they collect from these counties is bulked together into a seed lot. And they have a jar and a cooler representing for each species all the seed that comes from that seed zone. And it's got a label on it so they know where it came from. But for seed transfer, you can use that seed to plant, for example, at that star in the middle of Pine County. But alternatively, you might want to use seed from the southern region, in which case you have a different jar in your fridge that you can use to plant at that star. So having these zones will assist us if we want to make decisions about assisted migration. If you don't want to, you don't have to. We're not trying to dictate that. The seed zones in Minnesota are fairly large. About 300 miles is the biggest one. east to west and 150 miles north to south, but still it functions better than, it does allow some control over defining locality. So the other reason we're thinking about this is that there were two recent national strategies that identified the need for source identified in a genetically appropriate seed, citing all the wildfires that have happened, and specifically in the east, Hurricane Sandy and all the damage it caused. There is a national strategy to promote the health of honeybees and other pollinators, 2015. But more specifically to our cause, and that does relate to this, but the seed strategy for rehabilitation and restoration, 2015 to 2020, has as objective 1.3 the need to increase the supply and reliable availability of genetically appropriate seed. And to do this, action 1.3.2, we need to improve agency and partner capability to plan for seed needs by seed zone, which is very similar to the approach that we're taking. So we're following in line, and it will help, this really helps feed into this national program. And I want to highlight that the word seed zone is in their directive. Recognizing the importance of this, we started this project with the Forest Service and the Southern Regional Extension Forestry, so we have this website. We've been offering webinars to try to put the science of seed zones first, and now we're getting to a point we're ready to start carving these out. One of the reasons we're doing this as well is different states have seed zones, but we really need to define locality across state lines. So for example, for that star, you may call it Central Illinois, Eastern Illinois, or East Central Illinois. But if you look, if we determine that the seed zone itself is quite a bit larger, we may call it something like the Ohio River Basin, or maybe mid-central US, or maybe we can give it a nice small number that would fit easily on a jar in the cooler. Maybe it gets a number like 4F. The point is that this regionalized zone that does not adhere to state boundaries is more biologically relevant than those that adhere to state lines. So how do we do this? There are various models for setting up seed zones. Mostly they're climate-based models. So for example, the plant hardiness zones, which are up on the top left graph. And sometimes ecoregions are used as well, because these factor in climate and physical attributes. But there may be other information needed as well, for example, altitude. So looking nationally at the plant hardiness zone map, you can see pretty clear gradations east to west, so it is a good starting point for us. This is a fuzzy graph. It says 30-year normal precipitation annual. And out in the central US, you can see these lines pretty clearly, but there's a lot of blue on the eastern part of the US, but still in combination with some precipitation and hardiness zones, we can probably get a good idea of seed zones. In New York State, though, presents an interesting case of the importance of frost dates. Spring frost date is an important selector. And if you look on the left side, that's the seed zones for New York State. On the right side are the late spring frosts. And you can see there's a pretty tight correlation. These correlations, though, for spring frosts are tightly correlated with elevation or altitude. So perhaps the landforms related to elevation or altitude in combination with precipitation and temperature would be our most likely factors to develop these. The other thing to consider is smaller seed zones are probably better, because you can always lump seed together, but you can't split it once it's done. And so this map of Iowa is showing seed zones that they use, but we might want to draw a line down the middle. Again, you can always just put things together, but you can't split them apart once they're in the cooler. This is a picture of Canada's seed zones for Ontario. In Canada, the seed zones do function as seed transfer zones. It's something that's being renewed in that country. And I'm hoping we can have somebody from Canada discuss their approach to seed zones later in the spring of 2018. So hopefully look for that. But really important to this effort, we don't want this to just be federal agencies. We really want private nurseries and seed companies to collaborate in this process as well. The reason is, in the Northeast, state nurseries procure their own seed from across the state. They might keep it separate by seed zone or combine it if consumers demand it, but there's no guidelines for public and private sector nurseries that may cross state lines. They have no way to define locality. And frankly, it limits their market share because folks might say, well, I can't buy from your nursery because you're in another state, where that nursery might actually have a very good suitable seed source for planting in your location. So different nurseries have different practices, but if we can create a foundation, it should open up markets to validate seed movement, and it should provide more business to nurseries, give them some validation to cross state lines. So moving forward, we really want to define terminology associated with seed zones. There's a lot of language, there's a lot of factors that go along with it. We are planning to work with plants and trees. They may be the same seed zones. We may make plants a subzones within the tree seed zone. Stay tuned. There are also areas, and especially in the Southeast, where there are specialized plant communities. We may define some of these to guide seed transfer recommendations. But eventually, we really need to advance the science of seed transfer for both current and future climates. We can use the seed zones as origin, but we're going to need recommendations to educate consumers, whether they're federal, public agencies, or private landowners, on the best seed sources for planting in their area. And this is something that can be done. Public and private sector nurseries can assist. We can also, I'm hoping we can work with universities and extension folks as well. So where are we with this effort? Right now we're seeking volunteers. We've established 8 team regions. They're loosely based on ecoregions, but we just had to draw some lines that seem to make biological sense. So these are the 8. We would like to assign 1 leader per region. That person would kind of take the lead in that region to develop seed zones within that region, and participants would provide input until they all agree on a set of seed zones for each of those regions. We're planning a seed zone summit. It would be in Kentucky and Lexington in May 2018. We'll probably have some invites instead of just opening it up to everybody. I'm anticipating a few speakers will come and talk. The 8 representatives from the 8 groups will meet separately. They'll come together, and we'll try to put these zones together to develop some type of a cohesive map. We also need to figure out, how do we get this out in the landscape so that others can use this and see it. So that's all I have. If you have questions, please go to the Eastern Seed Zone Forum website. My contact information is on there. Southern Regional Extension Forestry did set up a registration for these participation groups. Please sign up. You'll be contacted likely by email about other folks in your group. Thanks for listening, and have a good day.